Well, it's just gone 12 noon here Melbourne time. So a very good afternoon to you all, or maybe it's good morning or good evening to you, depending on where you are listening and tuning in from all around the world. It's been wonderful to have people dialing in from all around the world to join us for International Coach Week 2021. My name's Natalie Ashdown from the Open Door Coaching Group, and we're very privileged and proud to be presenting this conference to you with our partners at Synergy Global, and a shout out to Heather Jane Gray, the CEO of Synergy Global, who's on the line with us this afternoon. And I'm looking forward, Heather Jane, to you absolutely hitting the chat box and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience around change management, practice and effectiveness as well, and the leadership of change management. So today, our International Coach Week, today's sessions are all about topping up our tool belts. I'm trying to give you some practical tools that we've been using in our coaching. And it's also a opportunity not only to learn, but to reflect on our practice and how we're using the models effectively. So today's topic, it's all about coaching through change. And the question is, should we throw out the models? Like, given everything that's happened, are those models still relevant to the change that we're actually doing and the coaching through change that we're doing? So that's what we'll explore today. So before I do, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians on the lands on which we all meet today, and their continuing connection to the land, the waters and the communities of Australia. We pay our respects to them and to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend acknowledgement to anyone that might be an Indigenous person from a country that you've orientated or you've come from today to join us. And I always think how wonderful it is that we can all join on different lands across the world, really, to join in on International Coach Week. So with that in mind, if you'd like to interact, please do that. Please, we've got people from India on the line. We've got people from just down the road here, kind of down the road and around the corner, Kate Shank, that's where Heather Jane's dialing in from. So people are from all around, and it's great that we can all come together in this way. Feel free to pop a message into the chat box, send your messages to the panelists and to the attendees, and we can pick up your comments. If you are here because you're interested in the ICF CCEU, so you're doing this as part of your professional coach development, don't worry, at the end of the session, I'll actually put up a screenshot for you and you can screenshot that CCU, save it somewhere safely, and before you know it, you've got everything you need to re-credential. So here we go. Today, in this session, I'd really like to focus on our change models, and those change models, for example, that we introduced within the Certificate for in Workplace and Business Coaching. Some of you have done that program and you'll remember back to, I think it's module 10, where we talk about coaching through change, very important topic. And we're really asking the questions, should we throw out the models? Like with everything that's going on, do these change models, do they really stand up in today's changing environment? People talk about the VUCA environment, the VUCA, VUCA environment. Do the change models still stand up in that kind of environment that we're facing? Did they stand up last year when we went through all of those challenges through COVID, when a number of us on the line were locked down for many months? Do they still stand up when we're thinking about our international neighbours and the challenges they're going through still with COVID? That's the question. Be interested to hear what you think about it, actually. And in order to think about that question, I'm going to take a look at Kotter's eight-step process for leading change. ADCA. Now, ADCA by ProSci, I haven't actually been accredited in ADCA, so I'm going to just put it up and let you have a think about it, but I'm not actually going to talk about it because I'm not accredited to talk about it. And then the other model that we can consider is Tuckman's stages of team development. And if you're interested, I'm not going to cover this one today either, only because yesterday we had a whole webinar on it. So if you'd like to access the Tuckman webinar around change and leading teams through change that we did yesterday, you're more than welcome to capture that off our website. And it'll be on the Coach Week 2021 page of our website. It will be up tomorrow for you. So there you go. Alrighty. So what I really want to dig into is Kotter's 8-step model for leading change. And if you go to kotterinc.com, wow, what a wealth of knowledge and resources that Professor John Kotter has actually got there on his website. There is an enormous amount of articles that you can Google search, scholarly articles. You can go and capture look at the book, Leading Change, his original book. So many wealth of knowledge of resources that you can access if you like to. But what we're thinking about today is Kotter's model was never designed originally as a coaching model. So that's what we've done here at Open Door Coaching, is taken a look at the steps and gone, okay, so if we understand these steps, what does that mean from a coaching point of view? How do we use the model to actually coach people? What coaching questions should we be asking? And to answer our original question, should we throw the models out? 100% the answer is no, we should not. We should be thinking, actually, in my opinion, for what it's worth, about how we can use these models to support our change processes. Not only that, how can we turn some of these classic models, these models that have been around, that stand the test of time, how can we turn those into coaching models? Which is an interesting thing, and we'll do that together on the line today. So, should we throw out the model? Well, no, because I think Kotter can actually be used, and it's in its original form, prior to initiating changes. So if there's any change that we're actually going to initiate, it's such a good idea to sit down with models such as Kotter, Adka, Tuckman, whichever one you're using within your organization. Pull it out, dust it off, have a really good think about how we're actually going through this change process. We can use these models, Kotter, for example, during change processes as well. So quite often even high performing teams get caught up in the change process, implementing the change. We need to stop and take a step back and ask those really important questions about where are we now, what do we need to do differently, and review the change processes during the change as we go along. We can use these models as post-implementation reviews or reviews of the actual change that we've been through. So we can use it at any stage of the actual change cycle that we're going through, particularly at the end, to look back, to learn those lessons, to capture lessons for continuous improvement. There's an enormous amount of research that says 85% of all change initiatives, so 85% of all change initiatives that organizations actually introduce into the organizations will fail. So if between 70 to 85% of all change initiatives fail, it just jives. I just can't understand it. Why wouldn't you take a model like this? Why wouldn't you rack some good quality coaching questions around it and then use that as one of the guiding forces for the change project that you're actually doing? So who knows? There's lots of reasons, obviously, lots of academic literature on why change projects fail. So I'm on a bit of a personal mission, I think, to actually get these tools and these hands into as many managers as possible so that they're really thinking about their change processes. They're coaching each other, they're working with each other, they're collaborating with each other, and we're avoiding those really horrible impacts that happen when change is not done effectively. So we can use these models for personal change. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because back in 1985, when Kotter released the 8-step model for leading change, he did it through Harvard Business Review. He's an emeritus professor still at Harvard. And when he did it back then, it was into the management consulting journals. So it got picked up by management consulting, got picked up by engineering, those kind of academic journals. It wasn't really thought about as a personal change model. This is where I think it's so powerful. I've always considered Kotter and thought about Kotter as not only a team, a model that we could use for team change, organizational change, but I apply it to myself as an individual for my own change and my own change processes. So I think what I'm trying to emphasize here is that sometimes these are models, like back in 1985 when it was released, it's released in a certain context. What's exciting to me is how we can take these models, some of the oldies but the goodies, and use them and keep them alive, and
And Heather Jane isn't, let me just make sure I think my headphones might have just switched off. So I'm just making sure that everyone can still hear me. If you could just pop a message into the chat box and let me know that you can still hear me, okay? Audio dropped out for just a second. Yeah, it just made a bit of a click in my ear. Okay, thank you, everybody. That's great. Nothing worse than to be sharing some what I think are wonderful
finding out that that something has switched off. Not to worry. Alrighty, that's great. Thank you. I'm glad you can hear me. Thanks, Nicole. Good on you. Yeah, and as Heather Jane has chipped in here, it's a great model for individual, team, and organisational change. So I think sometimes it's so I think sometimes people don't think about Kotter in that way. Alrighty, so now what we want to do together, and this is where I'm super keen for you to jump into the chat box. Let's just start generating these questions together. So let's have a think about Kotter, but let's think about, it's kind of like, all right, so what? So we've got Kotter, we understand the steps, and I'll explain them to you in a minute. So what? I know there's a step, but how do I actually coach people through that step? What great coaching questions would I actually ask at each of those steps? That's where I think we've got this powerful alumni that's come together on the line today to actually use it and see how we can actually use the model for coaching purposes. Now, originally, what's interesting is that Kotter said that Kotter gave the inference actually that it was a linear model. But I've never actually seen it as a linear model. It's not a do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this kind of model. What I see it is 8 steps that we need to follow, but we can loop back at any stage, a bit like the GROW model. We've got our GROW, but we can link back at any time, back to reality, back in checking on the goals, thinking about more options. We can move around. So I think the flexibility of this model is really high, and I think that's probably underutilized as well in our workplace. They're like, oh, we don't want to follow an 8-step linear model. It's like, actually we do. And we do have that flexibility of moving backwards and forwards. And I'll tell you a bit about that as we go along. So here we go. Let's explore Kotter together in the time we've got available. First step, create a sense of urgency. So if we're creating a sense of urgency, Kotter talks about, this is important that we understand, why is this change process important? Why are we doing this? Why do we just not bother? He talks about it from a kind of 1980s, in a kind of 1980s way, like, you burn the boats and you never look back, that kind of inspirational music coming in behind us. It's that kind of thing. What is the sense of urgency? Why are we doing this? Why do we have to do this change process? Now, think about this from an individual point of view. What a great question. If I'm going to change, I'm going to change my career. I'm going to change. I'm going to move into state. I'm going to uproot my family and move. If I'm going to initiate any big change process, or if I'm going through change myself, I feel like I'm going through change as an individual, as a leader, or as a manager, then let's talk about the sense of urgency that actually comes out of it. The burning platform, as Heather Jane says, yeah. So let's generate these questions. Here's some that we came up with. If we are coaching managers to coach their people, if we are coaching and we're coaching a change agent who's responsible, as they do at Heather, at Synergy Global, for initiating and maintaining and sustaining change projects, if we're doing that, then here's some great questions we can ask. At the very beginning, we can also ask these questions at any stage of the change process, which is what I really love about the flexibility of using the model in this way. What are we trying to achieve? What's driving the need for the change? How urgent is the change? What's the priority for the change? I also like questions like, how does the change stack up against everything else we're doing? Why do we need to do it now? Like, particularly last year when people were going through so much with COVID lockdown and organizations were still trying to drive change. We saw it. The question is, why now? We're so tired. We're so exhausted. You know, oh, I'm tired just thinking about it. So why do we need to do it now? When's a good timing for this change? Some good questions as well. Feel free, jump into the chat. Tell me what other questions you might ask around this phase. And Heather Jane says, great questions to ask to check out not just the top level. So we're not just asking this question of the most senior leaders, of the exec team. We're also asking it of their direct reports as well. We've talked about this a lot at Air Force, actually, that these questions are highly relevant across the ranks. They can also be customized to the actual organization that you're working with. So if you're coaching within an organization, customize the terminology. So for example, at Air Force, we'd talk about what's CAPS, or what's the Chief of Air Force intent? How does what we're doing link into the Chief of Air Force intent? So those kind of questions we could bring out as well. Great, let's carry on. Step number 2. Form a powerful coalition. So it's been updated, actually. It's a guiding coalition, and using the client's language, very important. So forming a guiding coalition, there's something about step number 2 that I really, really resonate with. When there's ever a change project that I'm going and to initiate for myself, for my team, for the organization, or within organizations that I'm working with, I'm thinking, who can we collaborate with? Who's the powerful coalition? Who's the guiding coalition that are going to come together in order to enable this change to happen? It's a really lovely question to ask. So the powerful coalition consists of those people who are the change champions that are going to help drive this change within the organization. Not only that, they're people of influence. So we go back to the Air Force implementation of coaching within Air Force as a great case study. And if anyone wants to catch up with Squadron Leader Anita Green, she did a presentation for us during Coach Week. I think it's up on the website now, talking about the impact of coaching and how they've rolled coaching into Air Force. And for those of you that are interested in return on investment, she gives some amazing statistics about the return on investment that they're getting from coaching by implementing coaching into the Air Force across the different training schools, across the different flight schools, across the different operational squadrons as well. So forming a powerful coalition, the reason I'm sharing that with you was because when the program was first introduced, we said, who do we need if we're going to start rolling out coaching into the organization? And we're going to train some key people in the Certificate 4 in workplace and business coaching. Then who do we need to have on those courses? Because they are going to be the people that start to plant the seeds within the organization. They're the people that we need to capture. So when the selection process was actually done for those positions on the course, the people that were making those selections looked at not only rank, but also the person's predisposition to leadership and their ability to influence change around coaching within the organization. So what effectively they did from the very beginning was formed that powerful coalition of people, and then that powerful coalition grew as we went along. And Synergy Global, as Heather Jane's mentioned, it's a steering committee or a steering team that's put together, that forms the group that's actually going to manage the change, bring the change through. Fantastic. Feel free to jump in with any of your other thoughts, questions, comments as we go along as well. So the type of questions we're actually asking here are questions like, well, who needs to be involved? At what level do people need to be involved as well? So here, for example, at Air Force, we're talking about who needs to be involved? What kind of ranks do we need to get involved? What level? If we got a Air Commodore on the course, one of the highest ranks in Air Force. What difference would that make to the ability to implement change within the organization? If we had different people at different levels and different ranks, what difference would that make? What are the strengths and the attributes that we need of those people? What would their roles be? And the other interesting question, I worked with one organization on a organizational wide change. And the question we asked was, how do we get a representative sample? If this change is going throughout the organization, then how do we get a representative sample to actually represent people through the change process? So really great questions. Now, again, we can ask this at the start of the change cycle. We can ask it at any point within the change cycle. I love it where we're implementing this change and then we say, who else needs to be involved? So one of the things that was identified at Air Force, who else needed to be involved? We needed to get the commanding officers involved. The commanding officers have been sending their key people to the programs. They were focused on professionally developing and putting the key people into the programs to influence that within the different force enterprise groups, the FEGs. What's interesting is that then we realized that they need to come on the program as well. So they need to get involved, not just in supporting and sponsoring the program, but actually coming on the program. So that was a big move that was made as well. Mike, thank you for jumping in there. You said at a recent session, the general manager, one of the frontline people identified and they wanted to discuss what they felt were the urgent areas for change. He called it the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, we use that terminology, don't we? Yeah. Heather Jane says we involve the executive and the informal leaders. So that's a very good point too. Who are the informal leaders that form part of this guiding coalition? Because they have the ability to influence and it's quite crucial. Yeah. And Heather Jane has also offered that the exec sponsor ranks, very important. Heather Jane has found that in health, defense, and even at Walt Disney. Thank you, Walt Disney World. Okay, let's have a think about step number 3. Now, step number 3, I think, fairly straightforward for us coaches, isn't it? Create a vision for the change. Excellent. Set our goals. Let's move on. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Let's take a really good look at this step, which is creating a vision for change. Many of us on the line have worked for some time with leaders on getting the vision right for the change. And it's never actually going to be right, but it's right for the time, it's right for the space, it's the best we can do. The thing is the vision can change. The vision needs to change. The vision needs to continue to be updated as the change process goes along. So Kotter, back in 1985 was quite evangelistic, I think, about this. He was saying, create a vision for the change, stand in front of the mirror and be able to communicate your vision. Keep it simple, keep it in words that people can respond to and carry on with. And I kind of laugh when I think about that, but hang on a second. He had a point there. Because when you think about, I think about, for example, the US elections and keeping those mantras and the vision for the change about what's possible. For example, Barack Obama saying, yes, we can. And when Barack Obama said that his vision for the American people, he said, I don't see reds, I don't see red states and I don't see blue states. I see the United States of America. So he was very clearly and so articulately painting the vision for what he saw. And if you read his book and you read Michelle Obama's book and you listen to his speeches, you can see that actually what we might think of Kotter going, oh, you need to practice in front of the mirror. Well, actually, yes, I'm sure. And Michelle Obama said that, Barack Obama did practice in front of the mirror. So we shouldn't just scoff at these kind of, what sounds like a 1980s rah-rah kind of thing. It's not actually, it's good practice. So things to think about. Ensuring a vision, a purpose, an intention is aligned with values is a great example with President Obama, as Heather Jane has mentioned there, and the importance of corporate communications from the very start. So yes, we'll talk about that at our next step. So asking ourselves the question, what is the vision? Not only the vision, but what's the shared vision? What's the shared vision? What will be different? I love that question. So if we do this thing called coaching at Air Force, what will be different? What are we expecting to see? And then how is that what we're expecting? How is that linked through to strategic vision? How is it linked through to Chief of Air Force's intent for what he sees as a 5th generation Air Force? So we've got visions that are set out by the leaders, and then the vision can then actually be brought through the change program. What will be different? I love this question. What links everybody to this vision? Everybody across the organization. What is it we want, or what direction do we want to go in? Now, until, in my opinion, and we've got the change experts on the line as well, in my opinion, until the leaders get really clear about that, everything that comes next is going to be a bit dodgy, right? We need to get clear about that. We might need to update it. We might need to think about it a few times. It might change throughout the course of the change project, but we need to have make that really clear. Spend the time on that. Think about that from a personal point of view. You know, I'm going to transition my career. I'm going to start something new. I'm going to do something that's new. It's a change. So what's the vision? What's the vision? What does that look like? What do I want to be different? Even in the very simple coaching demonstration that Bridget so beautifully did for us yesterday, she helped me create a vision for what I wanted to see during that coaching program, during that coaching session that she did. So it was wonderful. I saw myself and I imagined myself, and that was part of the change process as well. Alrighty, we're going okay for time. Keep jumping in there. Communicate the change. As Heather Jane said, the importance of communication cannot be underrated. One of our a person who I love to listen to. He was a key presenter at our Coach Week, International Coach Week forum. He's a partner with Synergy Global. Is Dr. Charlie Pellerin, who was the leading project manager and he is actually one of NASA's most highly decorated people who's not an astronaut. He wrote a book, and a book called I've lost the title. Heather Jane, help me out here. I can see it. How NASA builds teams. Sorry, how NASA builds teams. What's interesting in that book is he does describe a number of failed change projects, and the literature is very clear about this as well. They actually suggest that 85% of all conflict in the workplace and 85% of all change projects will fail because of lack of communication. So it is something that we really need to focus on, and it's thank you. Yeah, how NASA builds high-performing teams. So it's really, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the converted, but it staggers me how many times that we don't focus on communication. Even in the alternative disputes resolution, the ADR processes that I might be running, I always start. We've got, what are the key things that this dispute's about? I always write communication. 100% guaranteed, any dispute, any change, any conflict, communication is going to be in there. So we know that. So what? This is the thing, what we're trying to do together is go, okay, well, we know we need to communicate, but so what? What great coaching questions can we ask? We're not going to throw this model out. We're going to wrap some lovely coaching questions around it and go, what kind of coaching questions can we ask? Who do we need to communicate? What's the best way to do it? Who needs to communicate? Who does the message have to come from? A very important thing when we looked at the Air Force implementation, who needs to communicate? The intentions came from the commanding officers. They were the people that needed to communicate, and they did. And the higher the rank, the better. What are the key messages? How do you link those key messages through to the vision and through to the strategic intent? When's the right timing for the communication? All of these things. Should we do it via Zoom? Should we do it via video hookup? Should we do it by the phone? Do we get people in face to face? All of these questions. And not only that, how do we continuously communicate as well? So communicate, communicate, communicate. Or as my darling boy, when he was little, he said, they've got to moonicate, mum. They've got to moonicate. I'll tell you the story just quickly. It's quite funny. He said to me, my man said, when he was really little, he said, Mum, Mummy, what do you do all day? I said, well, sweetheart, I just help people learn how to communicate. And he said, oh, very thoughtful he was. He said, Mum, why don't they moonicate now? Because I said to him, I just teach people how to communicate better, actually, honey. I help people ask good questions and talk to each other, and they communicate with each other. It helps build better workplaces when we do that. It helps people go to work and be happy. I'm talking to a 4-year-old, and he says to me, Mum, why don't they moonicate now? And I said, well, darling, that's what we're trying to work out. Anyway, every time I see communicate the change, I hear this little 4-year-old going, Mummy, why don't they moonicate now? So anyway, back to communicating the change. So when's the right timing? What do we need to do? Yes, many of you have known my beautiful young man, Nathan, since he was 4 too. So he's not 4 anymore. Yeah. Heather James picked up here. Her earlier point is we need to consider that this is from the beginning, and that because Kotter puts it at number 4. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So Kotter put communication at number 4. But that doesn't mean we do it at number 4. It means that it's one of the key steps that we need to do. And Heather Jane is suggesting that we do it from the very beginning. So what needs to be communicated from the very beginning? It's often delayed, the communication. So the exec team, the exec steering committee team, they need to be very clear from the very beginning, and they need to be working out those communications. So thank you for picking that up. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. He says, good story. Maybe next time you're saying, we need to communicate this. How do we communicate this change? You might just hear, Mommy, why don't they moonicate now? It's like, yes, darling. That's what Mummy's trying to find out. Why don't they moonicate? All right. Remove obstacles. Now, remove obstacles is interesting, actually. So Kotter basically says, get rid of anything that's getting in your way. Over, under, around, whatever you need to do. It could be people, could be resources, could be attitudes, could be thought processes, could be systems, processes, could be anything, actually. It says remove those obstacles. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we could remove the obstacles, or we could bring them closer to us. We could help them become part, if they're people, we could help them become part of the powerful coalition. So really, this is where our influencing comes into it. So we could be removing the obstacles in terms of updating our beliefs or our mindsets or our attitudes, for example, or we could just be getting rid of those things that, sometimes people just throw rocks down in front of you just for the hell of it. It's what they do. So what do we do with those people? How do we bring them on board? How do we ensure that they are, pretty well most often they need to be listened to and heard. And then how do we communicate that change to them? How do we bring them on board? How do we communicate what's in it for me? So there's lots of good questions we can ask around removing obstacles. Here are some of the ones. What are the obstacles? So I like this question because now we're thinking about risk. So let's think about, what are the obstacles we're going to face? What are the risks? How do we overcome these obstacles, or what's going to hold us back? So think about personal change processes as well. If we're involved in a personal change process, then what's holding us back in terms of us, moving on from a personal point of view? What options do we have? that we can actually bring to the fruition to help us move past that obstacle. So I'm not so much a remove the obstacle kind of person. I'm a bit more through, past, over, around, acknowledge the obstacles, and what can we do to move through that, or carry on if we can. Heather Jane says, ensure that they feel heard. So yeah, ensure that they feel heard, give them a key role. You have to be brave with this so that they don't feel marginalized throughout the process. So yeah, sometimes it's about sitting down, isn't it, with those key people that seem to be the naysayers, and listening to them. And naysayers might just be the way that they are, but what can we learn from what they're saying? If we think about them as, okay, that they are highlighting in their own way risks or things they're not happy about, what can we do with that? So beautiful coaching questions start to come out here when we really talk that through. Otherwise, I agree, Heather Jane, they can be dangerous. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Engaging them might help them to become an advocate rather than someone who's going to actually be a naysayer and then kibosh the whole change project. Absolutely. All right, let's keep moving on. Creating short-term wins. This is a really another one of the 8 steps, really important. We're thinking about now, where will we get the short-term wins from? As Mike said, picking up the low-hanging fruit. What I think is most important about what Kotter said about short-term wins, the thing that I have to remember is, he says something along the lines of, don't herald the victory too early. So he says we need to create those short-term wins, find areas where we can put some runs on the board, absolutely, but don't herald the victory too early. Now, how I relate this is, we implemented one coaching program at Air Force, and it was really successful. We did 2 actually. We did the 2 pilot programs, and they were very successful in terms of achieving the outcomes that we wanted to see as an outcome of that program. But you can't say that Air Force has got a coaching culture. You can't go, right, we've done it, this is going to work for everybody. There's short-term wins. If we herald the victory too early, that then comes across as evangelistic. It's like everybody needs to do coaching, roll out coaching across the whole world. Why? Because we proved it with this one pilot program. So what's interesting is taking a bit of a sideways chunk approach instead. It's worked here. Where else can it work? Remember our chunking from our certificate for and workplace and business coaching. You can chunk upwards, downwards, or sideways. So let's go sideways. Where else could this work? Who else could benefit? Where else could we pick up these short-term wins? So a sideways chunk here is really important. What are the short-term wins? What can we celebrate? Who can we celebrate along the way? This is the other thing. Quite often change projects, they're just absolutely prolific, and they do not stop and just celebrate the short-term wins. So who's responsible for getting those wins on the board? What would it mean to achieve them? What's the first step we can take? What are the options? These are really, really quality coaching questions that we can ask. We can ask them of ourselves. We can ask them of the people that we're coaching. We can coach managers to coach their people to ask these questions. Don't forget to celebrate. How do we celebrate these short-term wins? What does it look like to celebrate? Rather than just moving on. Yes, and Heather Jane, that's important too. So the chunking skills, who else would benefit? Where else can we go? Who else needs this? What can we do now? That's really important for finding a number of actual internal pilots. So running a number of different programs, who else would benefit? Yeah. For those of you that listened to the webinar with a squadron leader, Anita Green, she talked about setting up coaching hubs. So setting up coaching hubs was a really important part of the implementation of coaching within Air Force. It was a way of sustaining the coaching programs and the investment in the coaching programs as well. It was a way of keeping people connected. It was a way of ensuring that we started to see what she called the fourth multiplier effect through the organization. So setting up those coaching hubs and forming a powerful coalition started to create short-term wins. So they were looking at, well, where do those coaching hubs need to be? Let's put one, for example, in Richmond in New South Wales, get some people together, create some short-term wins, look at where else we can actually put a coaching hub. The coaching hubs were really amazing because they came together through people coming together with a shared purpose and a shared intention. It was a tribe. They won't really use the word tribe, I don't think, but it was a collective, a group of people that came together in each of those coaching hubs to talk about coaching, to talk about their experiences with coaching, and importantly, to keep coaching alive. So that was all part of creating those short-term wins. Building on the change as it sounds, how can we build on the success? Where to from here? Who else needs to be involved? What's now possible? What's different? What needs to change? How do we create sustainability? So any of these questions, we're going to be asking these questions continuously throughout the change process so we can build on the change and build that continuous improvement. We're also going to be asking questions about risk. Where are the risks to the project? How are we mitigating those risks? What can we do about that in order to sustain the change? As Mike said here, think about this as well. There'll always be people that oppose the change for sure, as well as those who immediately adopt the change. So think of the bell curve here suggests, those 10% or the 20% or the 5% on the ends. They're equal numbers. So we concentrate focusing and working with the fence sitters, the people who are neither for or against the change, not those openly challenging your ideas. Yes. So actually, that was a very important part of Air Force implementation, was there's a whole pile, a whole pile sitting in the middle, people sitting on the fence going, which way is this going to go, this new initiative? And as Anita said, a 1% shift in the middle is a significant shift. That is a lot of people that are now being exposed to coaching and the opportunities that coaching in an organisation like Air Force actually provides. So yeah, 1% shift, massive difference. Yeah. And finally, anchoring the change into corporate culture. So how can we make it part of what we do? In Open Doors coaching culture framework that you saw the other day as well, it is about how do we enable a culture of coaching and what do we need to do to anchor that change in the corporate culture. So that is about, as Air Force did, rolling out those Coaching 101 programs. They shared with us that 9,000 people have been exposed to those Coaching 101 programs over the last 5 years or so. And that goes a long way to try to anchor this coaching approach, the coaching ideas, the approach to coaching questions and interactions into the corporate culture. They also did a lot of things that we call creating artifacts. So it's around posters, websites, internal websites. They did a coach week as well. So it's creating all those different hooks and anchors into the culture that we want to see. Anchoring the change. So there's some really nice questions we can ask there as well. Questions around how can we embed the change? What does it mean from a cultural perspective? What difference have we made? Where to from here? And how do we create sustainability? So this is the thing with change projects, they might be implemented, but we're thinking about how can we sustain this? As I mentioned on the Air Force webinar, one of the things that we've been thinking about a lot is people that might have been exposed to the Coaching 101, say 3 or 4 years ago. If they're not still thinking about coaching because it was a one-day workshop, chances are they're not, then how do we re-expose them? How can we keep those hooks, those links, those intentions going so that we can bring forward the changes that we're looking as people come and go out of the organisation as well, as they invariably will do. Alrighty, well, thank you so much. We're right on time now. So hopefully that gave you a good exposure to Kotter and the type of questions we might use. Hopefully it gives you an opportunity to keep some of these models alive, but not just take them in the 8-step linear model kind of process, but how do we really wrap coaching around them to make a real difference? There's there is a slide with all the questions on it. There's ADCA for those of you that want to look up the ProSci website, you can. We've also got Tuckman. And if you listen to the webinar that we did, I think 2 days ago now, we did Tuckman with coaching questions. Might have been yesterday, I've lost track. You can pick up forming, storming, norming, performing, and we wrapped coaching around that as well. We had a bit of fun with that. Of course, when we're supporting change, we need to be thinking about what's underneath the surface. So we will do a lot of good coaching there to think about what's underneath the surface. How do we help people in order to support their change? What's going on for them? So that's the whole topic of another conversation as well. Particularly as we transition, a couple of other ideas. Watch out for looking after people, looking after their mental health and well-being during the coaching process, during the change management processes. We need to recognize out of character behaviors, have conversations, draw awareness, be flexible, adaptable, manage expectations. We need during change processes, particularly like what we saw last year, we need to be doing physical activity. People need to not just be glued to their desks and extending their work days, but how can we keep up our physical activity? So just a couple of little pointers there just to watch out for in the end as well. Alrighty. Well, that brings us to the end of our coaching conversation around change. I think the answer is no, we don't throw out the models. In fact, we use them, we keep them alive. We think about how we can put coaching wrappers around them because they have so much benefit. And so I've really appreciated, thank you to Mike, and I really appreciate Heather Jane, you jumping in here, sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience as well. So I'll say thank you for now. Thank you, Nathan. It's very good of you as well. Wonderful to have you all join us. Enjoy the rest of International Coach Week. We still have a couple more sessions available to you. I look forward to catching up with you on our very next session together. And for those of you that are looking for the CCUs, just hold for a second. I'll stop the share and I'll bring up the CCU. Alrighty. Excuse me. Here it is for your screenshotting pleasure, screenshotting opportunity. There's a CCU certificate. As I said, I always try to save them in the one place. Save them. You'll be surprised how many you've got by the time you need to re-credential. So always a really great opportunity. Great thing about these webinars as well is because they are linked through to our certificate for workplace and business coaching. It's ACTP. It's an accredited coach training program with the International Coach Federation. So these sessions count as core competency, which is what you need to collect as well. There you go. Well, what a great opportunity to share some time with you, to think about coaching through change. Really looked forward to it, and I look forward to catching up with you at our next session. I will say goodbye for now. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks, Mike. Bye, Sweta. Lovely.